one race, competing visions for the future of New York City. A Democratic socialist, a guardian angel, a three-time governor, and the incumbent. Welcome to Battleground New York City, the fight for your vote. I'm S.E. Cupp. You were at candidate events today. Tell me what you heard and what you saw.
Mayors have three jobs. You got to keep crime low, quality of life high, and the tax base grow.
And there are going to be strange twists and turns before the votes are counted and the dust settles.
I think that much we can count on. Let's get right to it. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, where we're covering the all-important New York City mayoral election for the next 13 weeks or 85 days. Why? Because it's the thing that everyone's talking about. What's it going to mean for Democrats? What does it mean going into the midterms? What does it mean for Republicans and Trump? All eyes are on New York City, and we've got it all covered right here. I'm S.E. Cupp. Let's get right to it. Later in today's show, we'll meet the group asking New Yorkers to back Andrew Cuomo over Zohran Mamdani. But first, let's get the latest news from the campaign trail. Joining me now is Lisa Evers, a reporter for Fox 5 New York. Lisa, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Great to be with you.
So, Lisa, let's start with a tweet Andrew Cuomo posted Friday night. I remember I just logged off of work thinking be a quiet Friday night, and I see this tweet come up. And it says, in part, "In case you forgot, I'm Andrew Cuomo, son of Mario, grandson of Andrea. Welcome to the heavyweight bout, Zohran Mamdani. This is a two-man race. You look tired already. It's just the second round." Now, there's been more from Cuomo since, and we'll get to it. But just respond to this. It's like someone told Cuomo, get angry. You need to get angry. What did you make of this tweet when you saw it Friday night?
Well, my first reaction was, is he at a boxing match, or is this like a prelude to a WWE SmackDown Friday night appearance? What is this all about? And, you know, it was also like, wait a minute, did somebody tell him to wake up and to get some energy and to talk tough like he was talking during COVID when he was demanding of the federal government and the president to please provide PPE to New Yorkers during that crisis? But coming as it did, I had the same reaction you did. I'm like, okay, Friday night, summer weekend, you know, ready to enjoy myself, go out. And there it was. And I think for a lot of people, it was, you know, not offensive, but it was just, he's talking tough, but it's just kind of out of context because quite honestly, he's been more visible in the Hamptons this summer than he has been on the streets of New York City. And that's raised questions with a lot of the community leaders and a lot of the people who actually do vote in the New York City mayoral race.
Yeah, and maybe this will work for him. Maybe this will jolt, you know, his campaign and you know, the criticism was that he was kind of absentee running a rose garden strategy. Maybe this will help. But for a guy with a reputation as a bully, is this a smart rhetorical pose for Andrew Cuomo to take?
Well, I think it was more that it was just coming out of like what's the context of this? Why all of a sudden is he coming out with this? And this is this tendency of some of the candidates, some of the times, to do media strategies that are kind of not connected to reality or not connected to groundwork, laying the groundwork in the communities, in the neighborhoods, in the streets. Mayor Adams has definitely been trying to show himself more and do more events and be out there more, but some people are saying it's too little too late for him. And with Cuomo, people were just going, what? I mean, come on, that's the best you can do. And but they weren't surprised because we've seen this aspect of his personality, you know, at other times. But it just seemed like coming as it did Friday night, like a more of an entertainment thing. Like he's trying to pick a fight, or he's trying to, you know, let's flex, like to flex without anything really behind it.
And yeah, I mean, voters will judge whether that feels authentic for him, right? Because there is this side of him exists, but it definitely felt like a light switch was turned on. And since then, he's really come out swinging. There was a tweet about Mamdani's $2,300 a month rent controlled apartment. Here's how that went. I'm going to read it because it's something. He said, somewhere last night in New York City, a single mother and her children slept at a homeless shelter because you, Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, are occupying her rent-controlled apartment. You grew up rich and married an even wealthier woman. You've had weddings on 3 continents. You own property in LGBTQIA plus murderous Uganda. You make $142,000 a year plus stipends. And your wife works too, meaning you together likely make well over $200,000. No matter which way you cut it, Zohran Mamdani is a rich person. You are actually very rich. Yet you and your wife pay $2,300 a month, as you have bragged, for a nice apartment in Astoria. That should be housing for someone who needs it. We're in the middle of a historic affordability crisis. Millions of low-income New Yorkers need this apartment and an apartment like it. Yet your apartment remains rented to rich people who don't need it. Today, I'm calling on you to move out immediately and give your affordable housing back to an unhoused family who needs it. Leaders must show moral clarity. Time to move out. That's a mouthful, Lisa. And I mean, we could unpack it line by line, but to sum up, he's going after Mamdani personally now on an issue that propelled Mamdani to become the Democratic nominee in the first place, housing and affordability. Is this smart?
Well, there's a couple of, it's a question of how appropriate it is, as well as the facts behind it. This morning, Mamdani held a rally at Local 1199 SEIU. It's the healthcare workers. It's one of the biggest unions in New York City, one of the best organized. They've held marches and demonstrations with tens of thousands of people showing up there to make their particular point. He was standing there with former and current elected officials, including Congressman Jerry Nadler, who were talking about, he was mostly talking about Trump, and he was starting this 5-borough campaign, 5 boroughs against Trump, to say that Trump is the one, that it almost sounded like he was trying to run against Trump, even though, he's already in office and won the election by a landslide. But the fact of the matter is, he addressed the Cuomo issue. This came out yesterday, last night, and he addressed the Cuomo issue and said, first of all, he said, Andrew, this is typical vindictiveness of Andrew Cuomo. There's been a backlash on X about this, because people saying to think that a homeless mother, a homeless woman could go from being homeless to affording a $2,300 a month rent, or the $2,500 a month that Cuomo wants in his, what he's now calling Zohran's law, that he wants.
Right.
That's $30,000. I did a little math on that. That's $30,000 a year in rent. If it's supposed to be a quarter of your salary, that's $120,000 after taxes. And with New York City and state taxes and federal taxes, you'd have to be making about $180,000 to $190,000 to pass the credit check for a $2,300 a month apartment. It's rent stabilized. Mamdani is, whether you like him or not, he's not breaking any current laws, because with these rent stabilized apartments, it's to guarantee the rent. It's not income. It's not tied to somebody's income like New York City public housing or Section 8. So there's no income restrictions on it right now. But Mamdani basically was saying, listen, this is typical of him, and acting like we've got much bigger fish to fry and keeping our eyes on DC. But one of the recent polls that came out at the end of last week puts Mamdani at 50% of the vote, regardless of who his other opponent is, and that the other opponents put together only come up with like 49%. So he's flexing in his own way.
I haven't lived in the city in a few years, Lisa. Is $200,000 a year, is that rich in Manhattan?
People would say it's rich, but in Manhattan, in New York City, in this day and age, it's not. I mean, you're really after taxes looking at maybe $120,000. That's after taxes, and then you factor in the cost of everything else. That is not an affordable apartment for somebody who's making $15 an hour, or somebody who's had a rough time and just trying to get back on their feet, doing gig work and doing the minimum wage paid hourly work to try to make make ends meet. So this affordability thing, that especially with rents, it's really not taking into account the whole big picture of what's been happening with the New York City economy. I mean, they had no problem getting hotel rooms for migrants and paying for those. The city under Mayor Adams and the state, they had no problem doing that. They found plenty of money, billions of dollars, in fact, to house them, to give them free debit cards, to give them what they proudly called a package of services. And yet for a homeless New Yorker, a woman, or a person, one of the tens of thousands who is homeless in New York City, and that's not counting the ones who are doubled up in apartments sleeping on somebody's couches, they have to go through hell and high water just in order to get a rent voucher if they can find an apartment, because those are in short supply, and also to get any other assistance to get back on their feet.
One more before I let you go. I understand Mamdani's impulse to run against Trump. Trump is very unpopular in New York City. And in shifting focus off of his opponents in the race, he's basically telegraphing, I'm the nominee. But do New York voters want him to solve their problems if he's elected, or do they want him to take on the president? It seems like he's kind of trying to do both.
Well, I think one of the things, we've been talking about this. I've been talking about this with a lot of people yesterday and today, and it's basically there's a mood in the country. Nobody wants the status quo. We saw it with the presidential race that had President Trump. The polls were way off on him because pollsters, for whatever reason, we knew whatever else was going on, just did not gauge that public sentiment. And I think here in New York, people are saying, wait a minute, Mamdani, there's so much said about him that raises a lot of questions. He's very green. He hasn't been in office that long. What has he accomplished? And it's basically they want something new. And right now he's the new guy on the block.
And talking about change, so interesting. And Lisa, thanks so much for all of your insights and your reporting. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we're talking to the No Labels movement about their interest in our local mayoral election and a desire to defeat Zohran Mamdani. That's up next with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. And we're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, where we're laser focused on the New York City mayoral election. And joining me now to discuss the bigger picture is Ryan Clancy, spokesperson for the No Labels movement. Ryan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so for people who aren't familiar, maybe, please just first explain what No Labels is and what the purpose of your organization is.
So No Labels has been around for about 15 years, trying to advocate for America's common sense majority, combat this crazy partisanship that's so frustrating to so many of us. I mean, much of our work has been in Congress, where we're trying to build trust among Democrats and Republicans so they can solve problems. We're still doing that. Some people know us for our ballot access effort. Last year, we were trying to get on presidential ballots to put a unity ticket up. But there are some local races that we think have national implications, and the race for New York City mayor certainly qualifies.
Without a doubt. Beyond it having national implications, why is this race important to No Labels, and what role do you see No Labels playing? Because you're not on the ballot.
Because sometimes there are races that get nationalized, and this, of course, is a great example, that have implications well beyond what happens here. And our concern is that we are trying to create a situation where Democrats and Republicans actually have some space to work together. In a world in which Mamdani wins in November, we already have Democratic consultants and folks on the far left saying this is a blueprint. Other Democrats need to do this. And so come 2026, we will get people who are like Zohran Mamdani, who are running for Congress and offices up and down at various levels. And we don't think that's a good development for the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. I say that as someone who came up in the party. Mm-hmm. Or the country.
Well, sure. But if, let's say, Mamdani wins in New York, what's the case that he's not right for New York, whereas some other kinds of Democrats would be right for other parts of the country?
Hey, if he wins in November, then he will, by definition, be, as far as the voters are concerned, right for New York. But I think we have to remember that up until now, he has run 500,000 votes in a Democratic primary held in the middle of June on a 100-degree day. There's 5.7 million voters in New York. And so the election in November is going to be very different than the one that happened in late June.
Yeah, and we've been making this point. He won a 16th of the voting eligible population in New York City, and a general election could be very different from a primary. We'll have to see. He's still ahead in the polls. So you asked your members to help defeat Mamdani by contributing to Andrew Cuomo's campaign. You wrote in an email to supporters, Mamdani could seriously harm a great city and the prospects for bipartisan cooperation across America. Andrew Cuomo is not a perfect candidate, but No Labels is proud to stand with him. We believe he is the only Mamdani alternative with a viable path to victory, and that his win would mark a significant win for common sense and a setback for the far left. Ryan, just explain first the viable path, given that Cuomo lost in the primary and then had to become an independent to stay in the race, and he's still polling behind Mamdani.
Yeah. Well, it starts with what we said earlier, which is the election we're going to have in November is going to be very different from the one in June. Not only the composition, but the fact there's just going to be a lot more people. Number two, you look at like the Real Clear polling average, which aggregates a bunch of different polls. And right now it's at Mamdani 35, Cuomo's at 22, and then Sliwa and Adams come in 3 and 4. So that's not on its own an insurmountable lead. And look, frankly, because Mamdani had the advantage of really not being taken that seriously early on in the campaign, I think there was a lot about his background that hasn't been litigated yet.
Yeah.
And that when it gets out there more, that's going to have some real vulnerabilities for him.
Yeah, I think you could be right. If New Yorkers, though, if they feel betrayed by Andrew Cuomo over any number of scandals, why is No Labels telling those same voters to essentially get over that because Mamdani is so bad?
Yeah. So I live in New York. I would never presume to tell any New Yorker to do anything because they will just do the opposite.
Yeah,
That's how we're built.
You do know New Yorkers.
Yeah. So look, we're not telling anybody in New York to do anything. What we want people to do is focus on the stakes of what's really happening here. Is I think one of the things that gets lost sometimes is that you can lose a city. That can really happen. That as frustrated as people are right now about the inequality and the costs, and Mamdani is right about those as problems.
Yeah.
If you get a couple big things wrong, you can destroy a city. And here's what the two big things are. If you don't take crime seriously, and if you chase out your taxpayers, you get yourself into a spiral from which you will not recover. And this isn't theoretical. This just happened in San Francisco.
Right.
About 10 years ago, they got a progressive district attorney, a very progressive mayor, and only now have they dug out of the mess that was created by a lot of those policies by electing more common sense leaders for the mayoral and district attorney position.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We remember Chesa Boudin was ousted pretty summarily, and that's happened repeatedly over several big cities from Chicago to San Francisco to LA. Ryan, stay right there because I've got a lot more that I want to talk to you about. We'll be right back with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. Back here on Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote, one more time with Ryan Clancy, spokesperson for the No Labels movement. Ryan, for centrists like me, there's a strong desire to move the parties back to the moderate middle. Isn't that a project that has to begin, though, with the primaries and the primary system, which incentivizes extreme candidates?
I mean, that's a huge part of it. I mean, when we look at why is it that we have a Congress that is so completely out of touch with where most of the electorate is, it begins and ends in the primaries. And of course, that problem gets worse when you have some of the redistricting shenanigans that have gone on both sides. Texas is only the latest offender, but it just makes more and more districts safe for one party or the other. The primaries become the only election that matters, and these very low turnout races determine the representation for everyone else.
Yeah, and every 2 or 4 years, I know a lot of voters are like, how did we get here? I mean, it starts earlier than on election day.
It does.
And I don't have to tell you this. The country's very frustrated with the two-party system. We know from polling that a majority of voters feel like they're not being represented fairly by the left or the right, and that the parties have moved too far to their flanks. What's the No Labels prescription?
Well, I mean, look, there's no shortage of good ideas out there, and there's plenty of good candidates out there that actually represent what most voters are looking for on issues like immigration and affordability and the like, including in the Democratic Party, like a Jared Golden, a Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, a Josh Shapiro, a Steve Beshear. That is the path to the Democrats getting back to national relevance for a lot of reasons, and we can talk about more in a bit. Going down the Mamdani path, which is certainly where the progressive wing of the party wants to go, is a dead end, not just for the city, but for the country, to the extent that Democrats across the country copy this as a blueprint.
But isn't there a risk in nationalizing this? If you make Mamdani the boogeyman here, and he wins, how does that help you in future races where lots of younger progressive Democrats are trying to do the exact same thing he is, which is take on older establishment status quo candidates?
So I want to make really clear, we're not making Mamdani a boogeyman. And I don't care what Donald Trump has to say about Mamdani. And I think New Yorkers shouldn't care, because the mayor of New York is not running to be the leader of the resistance against Donald Trump. The mayor of New York is running to be an executive of a city with 300,000 people. And the concerns with Mamdani have to do with not just the radicalism of his ideas. When you look at his affiliations with the Democratic Socialists of America, they want to nationalize industries and all kinds of ideas that actually are affiliated with communism. Put that aside for a second. Just focus on the ideas in his campaign. Rent control is the best example. This is an idea, this is his signature housing idea, Mamdani's. It fails everywhere it's tried. Like, this is not a lab experiment and we're like, well, you know, we're frustrated and maybe this will work. It fails. And this isn't me saying this. This is every economist. This is Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winner from the New York Times, said the fact that rent control is bad is one of the best understood and least controversial ideas in all of economics. Sweden actually had this nationally, and an economist did a study of it, and he said, rent control is the best way to destroy a city except for bombing. Because what it does is it destroys the economic incentives to invest in buildings, to improve them. And so what that makes you ask is, if Mamdani thinks an idea this provably awful is good, then what else does he think is a good idea? Because that's got to be the concern here. Forget about Trump for a second. The national implications is, what is he going to do to the quality of life in New York? And my concern as a New Yorker is that the things he says he cares most about doing, making things more affordable for people, helping people in poverty get a way out, that it's going to make all those things worse.
You know, I get you. And I'm reminded, you know, economists had a lot to say about Donald Trump's tariffs too. And I happen to agree with what they said, that tariffs are attacks on Americans and trade wars are bad. But I'm not sure his voters care. In a similar way, I'm not sure New Yorkers who are just starving for change really care about what economists have to say. He's picking the right issue in a way that Trump picked the right issues. How do you get around the fact that for a lot of voters, feelings don't care about your facts?
Well, because I would ask people to think about, and this gets to the point we talked about earlier, how you can break a city. Like, look, I've been living in New York City on and off, mostly on, since the early 2000s. And if you came up in New York City at any point during that time, you came up in a city where crime was almost always low. It was safe.
I did.
People have no idea that 35 years ago, there were 2,200 murders a year in the city. And now there's less than 400. And that's a direct consequence of decisions made by our mayors. So that's another area where Mamdani, you look at how hostile he's been to police. You look at the Midtown shooting we had a couple weeks ago, and come to find out the special police unit that responds to that responds to terrorist attacks, Mamdani wanted to disband it. So I really would just ask people, as a fellow New Yorker, forget Trump, forget the name calling, look really specifically about the ideas he's proposing, where they've been tried, and over again, you're going to find that they have failed, often catastrophically.
Well, and this is the kind of criticism that Mamdani needs to hear and address, because as you've pointed out, he turned out a smallish amount of New Yorkers to vote in the primary, and now the stakes are much higher. So I'm sure he'll have to answer a lot of questions about these specific policy issues. And I'm really glad you came on to lay it all out and, talk about where no label sits in the middle of all of this. Really interesting. Ryan Clancy, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and we'll be back tomorrow with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote.